The Boy Who Had to Die, the untold story of Cleopatra's son, the Ides of March 44 BC. Julius Caesar lay bleeding on the Senate floor, 23 stab wounds marking the end of Rome's most powerful man. But here's what they don't tell you in history class. Caesar's death wasn't the end of the story. 3,000 miles away in Alexandria, a 3-year-old boy played in the palace gardens, completely unaware that his father's assassination had just signed his own death warrant. His name was Ptolemy XV Philopator Philometor Caesar. History would remember him simply as Caesarion, Little Caesar, and his existence alone was dangerous enough to topple empires. The Forbidden Heir. Let me ask you something. What happens when the most powerful woman in the ancient world has a child with the most powerful man in Rome? You get a political nightmare that would haunt the Mediterranean for 17 years. Cleopatra wasn't just some seductive queen from the movies. She was a brilliant strategist, fluent in 9 languages, and the first Ptolemaic ruler in 3 centuries who actually bothered to learn Egyptian. When she aligned herself with Julius Caesar in 48 BC, she wasn't playing games. She was securing her dynasty's survival. But there was one problem nobody could ignore. Caesarion represented something Rome had sworn to never have again: a king. Caesar himself walked a razor's edge. He had been declared dictator perpetuo, dictator for life, but never dared claim the title of king. The Romans had overthrown their last king 5 centuries earlier, and the very word rex, king, was political poison. Yet here was his son, born in Egypt, heir to both Roman power and Egyptian divinity. The conspiracy deepens when you realize this. Caesar never officially denied Caesarion was his son. In fact, he allowed Cleopatra to name the boy after him. He invited her to Rome, installed her in his private villa, and erected a golden statue of her in the Temple of Venus. Some ancient sources claim Caesar wanted to change Roman law to legitimize the boy. The Senate was terrified, and terrified men do terrible things. The 17-year countdown. After Caesar's assassination, Mark Antony and Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, divided the Roman world between them. But Cleopatra had plans of her own. She recognized what historians often overlook. Caesarion's very existence was a trump card that could reshape the entire Mediterranean power structure. She declared him co-ruler of Egypt at age 3. She had him depicted in temple reliefs as a god-king alongside her. On the walls of the Temple of Dendera, you can still see them today, Cleopatra and Caesarion, carved in stone, making offerings to the Egyptian gods. She was building his legitimacy brick by brick, image by image. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. When Mark Antony and Cleopatra formed their legendary alliance, they didn't just create a romance. They created an alternative vision for the ancient world. In 34 BC, at the donations of Alexandria, they declared Caesarion king of kings and the true heir of Julius Caesar. This wasn't just pomp and ceremony. This was a declaration of war against Octavian's claim to Caesar's legacy. 2 boys, neither Caesar's biological son, Octavian was his great-nephew, fighting over the inheritance of the ancient world. Except one of them had the blood, while the other had the power. The final gambit fast forward to September 31st BC. The Battle of Actium has ended in disaster for Antony and Cleopatra. Their fleet is destroyed, their empire is crumbling, and Octavian's legions are marching on Alexandria. Cleopatra knows the end is near, but she still has one move left. Ancient sources tell us that Cleopatra sent Caesarion away. Some say to India, others to Ethiopia. She loaded him with treasure and dispatched him with trusted tutors, telling him to flee and survive. At 17 years old, Caesarion was being given a chance to disappear into history, to live out his life in obscurity, rather than die for his bloodline. The young man got as far as the Red Sea port of Berenice. He was almost free. Almost. The betrayal. Here's where the story becomes a tragedy worthy of Shakespeare. One of Caesarion's tutors, a man named Roden, convinced the teenager to return to Alexandria. According to the ancient historian Plutarch, Roden told Caesarion that Octavian was willing to let him rule Egypt as a client king. It was a lie. Whether Roden was bribed, threatened, or simply hoped to curry favor with the new regime? We'll never know, but the result was inevitable. When 17-year-old Caesarion returned to Alexandria, his mother was already dead. Cleopatra had taken her own life just days before, and Mark Antony had fallen on his sword before that. The boy walked into a city that had already surrendered, seeking an audience with the man who had every reason to want him dead. 2 Caesars are one too many. The philosopher Arius supposedly gave Octavian this advice, adapting a line from Homer. "It is not good to have too many Caesars." The wordplay worked in Greek, but the message was universal. As long as Julius Caesar's biological son lived, Octavian's claim to be Caesar's true heir would be questioned. The historical record goes silent on the exact details. We know Caesarion was executed shortly after Octavian took Alexandria in August of 30 BC. Some sources say he was strangled, the traditional Roman execution for fallen enemies. Others suggest poison. The truth died with him, but consider the brutal pragmatism of it. Octavian spared Cleopatra's other children, her 3 offspring with Mark Antony. They were paraded in his triumph, then raised by his sister. They lived comfortable lives in Rome. Only Caesarion had to die, because only Caesarion was Caesar's son. The cover-up that shaped history. Here's what makes this story even more chilling. Octavian, soon to be known as Augustus, Rome's first emperor, spent decades erasing Caesarion from history. The boy's images were chiseled off monuments. His name was struck from records. The official Roman narrative barely acknowledged his existence. Why? Because admitting that Julius Caesar's true son had lived and been executed would undermine everything Augustus built his legitimacy on. He was Divi Filius, son of the divine Julius. How could that claim hold weight if Caesar's actual flesh and blood son had been murdered for political convenience? The erasure was almost complete. If not for a handful of references in Greek histories and those stubborn Egyptian temple carvings that the Romans couldn't reach, Caesarion might have been forgotten entirely. The haunting question: imagine a different timeline. What if Caesarion had stayed on that ship to India? What if he'd lived as an exile, carrying Caesar's blood into obscurity? Or what if Octavian had made a different calculation, raised him as a puppet king, controlled and contained? Would Roman history have unfolded differently? Would there have been an Augustus, a Pax Romana, an empire that lasted 5 centuries? Or would there have been another civil war, another generation of bloodshed? We'll never know. Because in the end, Caesarion's greatest crime was simply existing. He was murdered not for anything he did, but for who his parents were. His death was the final period on the sentence that began with Caesar's assassination 17 years earlier. The boy who would be king never got the chance, and the man who killed him became the most powerful ruler the ancient world had ever seen. If this forgotten chapter of history intrigued you, hit that like button and subscribe to dive deeper into the mysteries and conspiracies that shaped our world. What other historical figures were erased from the record? What secrets are still hidden in ancient stone? Join us as we uncover the stories they didn't want you to know. Next time we're investigating the mysterious death of Alexander the Great. Was it murder, and did his generals cover it up? You won't want to miss it.